Now, of course, it's going to get a little more complicated because you know that all of our classes have these like rigorous, lengthy texts and novels that we're expecting our students to read. So I know like in French 1, we've got Les Pirates Français des Caraïbes, which is like the French Pirates of the Caribbean. We've got Pauvre Anne, which is Poor Anne, and I know like Spanish is Pobre Ana, which is similar. And then, you know, there's novels all the way up through AP and longer complicated texts. So at that point, right, we're really going to get into a lot of questioning and answering, right? So at that point, I'm going to teach my students the target vocabulary ahead of time using that procedure I just described, right? And even when the words get more abstract, like you can still create comprehensible input for students, right? Even if I was teaching something as complicated to show as like entonces, right? So this, then that, right? So maybe I have two different things that are happening. I write the word entonces down on a piece of paper, and then students have to connect those two ideas with the word entonces in the middle. Right, so I can even complicate a vocabulary, I can teach that way. But then I get into my reading, right? So we're going to do some reading together, and then I'm just going to ask a lot of questions. I'm going to turn to a student, I'm going to say, who is this chapter about? What are they doing? Where are they coming from? Why are they doing it? What's the relationship between this character and this character? What do they look like? What do they sound like? How do they feel? And I'm just going to like fire these questions out over and over again, super quick and super fast, right? And I'm not going to stop and spend a lot of time teaching like grammar or vocabulary. I'm just going to push students to like hear what I'm saying, listen to it, look at it, and if I hit it enough times and repeat it enough times, like they're going to be able to pick that up on their own. So this is just kind of an overview explanation of what the process looks like. I'm of course going to do a much more detailed explanation and show you some concrete ways you could actually put this together for your classroom, but this is the basis of the way that I like to lesson plan, because it focuses on pushing students to engage with the language and communicate, as opposed to memorizing grammar rules or lists of vocabulary. Let's go ahead and take a look at the lesson plan that comes about halfway through the year and focuses on reading our novel. So here I am with my exit ticket for this lesson, which is about Chapter 3, Scene 2 of Les Pirates Français des Caraïbes, the French Pirates of the Caribbean. And so here, I'm going to be focusing on two things: the target structures or vocabulary and the content, right? So in my exit ticket, this one is pretty straightforward, right? So this is the very first lesson on Chapter 3, Scene 2, and I'm really just focused a lot on, did they understand the words? Are they understanding the overall narrative of this story? Now I'm going to come back later, probably in the next day, and ask a lot more complicated questions, and maybe focus in on some small grammar things as well. But right now, I'm just concerned about meaning. Is the meaning getting across, and are they focused on those target structures? So I could pull up my unit plan for this one. I'm not going to do that, so you'll just have to take my word for it. So some of the target structures that we're going to focus on, okay, so if we look at question number 1, we have qui, which is a question word we're really focused on. It means who or whom. Okay, then in the second one, we've got qu'est-ce que, so another question thing, what is it? We've got dit, which means says. We have donc, in. So these are all target vocabulary. Aime. We've got n'aime plus, which means no longer likes. We have je t'aime, so we have our pronoun T apostrophe you. So that's another target, right? So these target vocabulary are listed by chapter and by scene. And so I know from my unit plan that these are things that are really important that I really want to hit on, okay? Vont means where do they go. All right, so these are all target vocabulary I really want to focus on. So I just have comprehension questions here for my exit ticket today. So I really just want to know, did students understand and can they navigate this in French? All right, so that's what I'm going to be asking about today. So that's my exit ticket. So I'm going to go to the beginning of my lesson now. So I've got students will be able to read and understand appropriate texts, Chapter 3, Scene 2 of Pirates Français des Caraïbes. I've got my agenda, which is pretty bare bones. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to see if students remember some target vocabulary from previous chapters, right? So in the previous chapter, we had a whole thing about going to the market to buy shoes. So I'm also going to hit some colors, some question words, etc. But students are going to translate this English into French, which is very difficult, actually. Translating from English to French is much harder than translating from French to English. Or, you know, Spanish to English. Because if you think about it, it's kind of like multiple choice questions. Like if I give you the French, well, you can guess and have a pretty good shot at finding an English word that matches. But if I give you English, well, you just have to know all the French words. So it's pretty tough. So that's first. So that's to refresh our memory about the structures from yesterday that are going to show up again today. Then we are going to do a little bit of grammar stuff because I know on the next common assessment, students are going to have to use some of these verb conjugations. I'm not expecting them to have memorized all of these. I really just want them to get across the idea that the verb looks different depending on who's doing it. So I'm giving them the verbs right here, and then I'm just going to give them a few quick sentences to put the correct form of the verb in, just to get them used to the idea. But really my big focus here is, again, these are using some of the target structures, so they're going to be translating those. So they've already translated from English to French, then they're going to do some verb stuff and translate from French to English. So that whole thing is going to take maybe 10 minutes, and that's all the grammar and all of that I'm going to do. So now I'm going to move on to my chapter. So the very first thing my students are going to do is they're going to skim through the chapter. This is reading, right? And they're going to look for cognates and words that they don't know. Now there shouldn't be that many words that they don't know because I've already previewed the vocabulary with them. I am going to leave them a few words that they don't know because I want them to get in the habit of trying to deduce meaning using context. So they're going to write down the words that are cognates. Those are the words that are the same in English and in Spanish or in French. And then they're going to write down words they don't know and they're going to look them up. That's first. Next, they're actually going to go ahead and read it out loud to a partner, and I'm going to be walking around grading their pronunciation. So that's going to go right here. I have a rubric for that. So that's getting at the speaking, right? Then next up, they're going to ask and answer each other. They're going to do this in groups, some comprehension questions. They're not the same comprehension questions as the exit ticket though, but they do use a lot of the same vocabulary, as you can see. So once they've asked and answered those questions, then I'm actually going to go back and I'm just going to start asking every student in the classroom these questions, different questions, and I'm just going to hit that target vocabulary, right? So this is going to be a big part of my lesson, is just who did it? Why did they do it? You told me who it was. Was it this person or was it that person? No, who was it? And then I'm going to ask somebody else, who was it? Was it this person or that person? And remember, my goal is for students to hear the questions and see the questions and be able to understand what I'm saying and then force them to engage with that to give me an answer. Because that means they're using their knowledge, they're speaking, they're listening. They did it with a partner, now they're doing it with me. They're having to report back to the class out loud in French and in writing. So that's how they're really going to internalize that vocabulary. So again, I'm not really going to tell in this lesson any of the words that they need to know, right? Like if they need to look up a few words, that's fine, but there is no vocabulary component to this lesson. At no point am I going to stop and say, okay, we're going to memorize 10 words right now. And all the grammar structures as well, right? Like they're going to be able to figure most of it out for themselves. Now, of course, I have previewed some of this with them, like we did the command lessons. So just like that, I previewed some of this vocabulary. But at the same time, like again, I'm never just handing a list of vocabulary to students and saying memorize it. Then they're going to ask and answer their own questions. So we're trying to like do a little creativity here. And then finally, they're going to summarize what they learned in French and by drawing pictures. And then last, they'll take their exit ticket.